Diving deep into the fighting game genre's history will reveal many types of games, from traditional one-on-one fighters to whatever battle construction vehicles is. But the elusive crossover fighter is one that's earned a passionate fanbase over the years. Throwing two companies in the same room and forcing them to battle each other is a tale as old as time, with one of my favorites being Capcom vs SNK 2. Released 25 years ago as of me recording this video, CVS2 is a stone-cold classic, one that improves on its predecessor in every way, and through the powers of Athene, we can now play it on modern systems. Older viewers of my channel will know that I covered the game a long time ago in a comparative piece with CVS1, but this video is going to contain my usual subject matter. You know, things like gameplay systems, development information, and incorrect Japanese pronunciations. Now that we've chosen our grooves and locked in Ratio 4 Helmaru, let's explore the awesome world of Capcom vs SNK 2. Releasing a full-blown CVS1 sequel with massive gameplay, presentation, and audio altercations only 1 year after the original's release couldn't have been easy, and it's all thanks to a team of dedicated genre fanatics. Directed by Hideaki Itsuno, the famed creator behind Devil May Cry 3, Ravel School's Modellista, and a bunch of other games that everyone loves, and produced by Darkstalkers and Street Fighter Alpha lead Noritaka Funamizu, CVS2 was developed extremely quickly. Before I continue, I would like to shout out It's Fantastic.moe, an awesome archival website that features translated developer interviews. Most of this segment's information stems from their archival work, and I'll leave links in the description. If you ever wondered why Capcom swung big with CVS2, it's because the game was planned to be their final 2D fighter. This sounds unbelievable from a fan's perspective, but when you hear what Funamizu had to say, this starts to make sense. We had originally planned for Capcom vs SNK to be a full series, with plans for up to Capcom vs SNK 3, but for various reasons we decided to stop it here. Honestly, that goes for 2D fighting games in general. Even within our own company, we're made fun of for clinging to our own ways. I know for a fact that there are lots of people out there who still enjoy 2D fighting games, but it's really tough to keep making games while they're being trashed. So we're thinking of a new way to do 2D fighting games. For starters, we figure this will be the last one with sprite-based graphics. After this, it'll probably be 3D graphics, or maybe something else. Unless you time-traveled to the present day from the Dark Ages, I'm sure you know about the industry-wide shift towards polygonal graphics throughout the 90s. If you can think of a series that originated in the 80s as a 2D game, then it most likely received a sequel with a radically different presentation style during the following decade, with this phenomenon extending to the 2000s. The sheer concept of a sprite-based fighting game was viewed by many to be knocking on death's door, but as most of Capcom and SNK's character rosters had already been fully animated for the first crossover, it made sense to reuse these assets for the sequel. Despite there being plans for a third entry, CVS2 was designed as a hypothetical final series installment. In other words, the team wanted to include as many ideas into the final product as possible, ensuring that the title could stand on its own in future as a complete body of work. There's a fundamental difference between making the last entry in a series and making something intended to have a sequel. Movies are the exact same way. If it's part of a series, it's obvious when a second entry is building up to a third. If you don't have that mindset when you're creating something, sequels become very difficult to create. This time, I felt this was all I had left in me, so I left nothing on the table. I guess you could say that was our main focus with CVS2. Capcom's design philosophy for the game was described as quote-unquote expanding our breadth, meaning that it had to appeal to different kinds of fighting game fans. Mechanics from Third Strike, Alpha 3, KOF 94, 98, Samurai Showdown, and Garou Mark of the Wolves were all found within this one game, and for reasons I'll cover later, I believe that locking them behind the groove system was very clever. What's also smart is how veteran artist Shinkiro went about creating his work for the game. Unlike most fighting games, every character in CVS2 has two renders, one created by Capcom's Kinu Nishimura and the other by Shinkiro. The latter created all of these illustrations in Photoshop using extensive adjustment layers to perfect their coloring. I don't know about you, but I always assumed these were created by hand using pen and paper, but they're actually entirely digital. Similar efforts went towards stage design and audio creation, with my favorite example being the Ice Stage. It starts off relatively simple, but a giant ship soon moves way closer to the camera in real time, leading to extra background motion and color. Scrolling lead Chika Nagayama was responsible for ideas like this, with her primary goal being to incorporate as much movement and life and energy into the background as possible. Sound leads Masayuki Endo and Satoshi Issei understood that impactful audio is paramount to leaving a lasting impression on players, with strong effects being added to character voices. The title soundtrack was, and still is, extremely catchy and just so high energy and memorable, it's awesome. But it was mostly composed through the Novation Supernova 2 synthesizer, with tracks being created based on rough sketches of early stage designs. In stark contrast to other Capcom fighters, individual character themes simply don't exist within CVS2, and this is because of storage limitations. Having to create 48 new themes and cram them all into the arcade board just wasn't possible, so stage themes were given priority. After researching all of these developer anecdotes, I've come to the conclusion that Capcom vs SNK 2 was developed as a sort of farewell party. If this truly was Capcom's final 2D fighting game, then it only made sense for them to go as big as possible, pouring as much love and effort as they could into the game. Even today, CVS2 simply oozes with charisma, and just by playing it even casually, you can tell that the developers had a great time working towards their end goal. But it wouldn't be worth it if the final game wasn't any fun, so I think it's about time we explore its gameplay systems. If you had grown accustomed to CVS1's 4-button layout, then you'll need to think again, as CVS2 goes for a Street Fighter style 6-button format. 3 punches, kicks, throws, blocking, and guard meter management are the baseline mechanics, with the iconic groove system throwing a grenade into the mix. If you aren't aware, these fundamentally change the way players approach neutral, combos, and defense, while never feeling needlessly complicated. The first game had 1 groove for each company's respective style, but this has been increased to 6. In the interest of time, I'll focus solely on the important qualities of these grooves, as explaining every single little detail would take eons. C-Groove is modeled after Street Fighter Alpha 3's A-ism, giving players 3 bars of meter, the ability to cancel level 2 supers into level 1 supers, and a dodge roll. A-Groove is Alpha 3's V-ism, having 1 bar of meter and custom combos, allowing for special-to-special cancels. P-Groove is reminiscent of Third Strike, where parries can be used to offensively defend against strikes. S-Groove originates from KOF 94, featuring meter charging, a spot dodge, and unlimited level 1 supers when on low health. N-Groove is taken from KOF 98's Advanced Mode, where players can store up to 3 stocks of meter and activate Max Mode for a 20% damage buff. And finally, K-Groove utilizes Samurai Showdown's Rage Gauge with Garrou's Just Defense system. Your meter can only be built by taking damage, automatically activating damage and defense buffs when enraged. Extra techniques like dashing, running, short hops, tactical recoveries, safe falls, and alpha counters are locked behind specific grooves, meaning you can't have every mechanic enabled at once. If this were the case, CVS2 would suffer from an overwhelming mechanical bloat, and it would end up feeling like one of those crazy Mugen games. On the surface level, grooves are a neat mechanic that lead to some extra gameplay options, but when you really dig deep into their design, they represent what I believe to be a masterclass in fighting game development. Forcing the player to choose their preferred mechanics not only allows them greater agency over how they approach a battle, but it leads to boundless innovation. In a world where fighting games often receive flack for containing homogenized system mechanics and styles of play where developers specifically intend the player to behave in a certain way, CVS2's hands-off approach gives you all the tools in the world and lets you make your own fun. Every fighter has a groove they excel in, of course, with A-Groove Bison and Sakura immediately springing to mind, but the game never intentionally tries to sway you off something that is kind of unoptimal. For example, even though K-Groove provides Zangief with stronger offense and defense options, there's nothing stopping me from using the noticeably inferior S-Groove if I really want to. As a spectator, you can learn a lot about a player's psychology and overall experience by analysing what groove and characters they pick, with the top CVS2 competitors demonstrating how these grooves' unique capabilities serve their game plan. The closest comparison I can make is actually Devil May Cry, as that series lets you experiment with all types of battle that fits your style. With this in mind, you can view CVS2's gameplay loop as somewhat of a fighting game sandbox, and look, I know that sounds a bit weird, but just hear me out. The end goal is obviously to defeat your opponent, right? But the way you go about this extends past the usual choices of character selection. Sure, there are some insane character archetypes present in other fighting games, but to decide on basic system mechanics within a team of 3 fighters? Because I suck butt at math, I'm unsure of how many team combinations are theoretically possible, but when you take grooves into account, I estimate that this has to be somewhere in the 6 digits range. All of this may seem pretty extensive, but I've yet to mention the ratio system. Yep, there's another mechanic entirely. In the first CVS, you had 4 points to buy your team, with each fighter being locked into specific point categories. The higher the ratio, the stronger the character would be, which meant some fighters were forced to be low tier. I don't think CVS1's implementation of the ratio system was bad in theory, but in reality it led to larger teams of weaker characters drawing matches out to a snail's pace, and it just didn't leave much room for experimentation. Conversely, CVS2 lets you freely choose up to 3 characters on a team, with one of them needing to be at least ratio 2. You can choose a 2-character team with either a ratio 3 and 1 or 2 ratio 2s, or even select one ratio 4 fighter. This boosts their damage output to a ridiculous extent, but if you lose the round even once, it's all over. Onto the character roster now, and boy, is this display gorgeous. Every fighter is raring to go, playing into the high energy atmosphere of the game at large. After you jump over the hurdle of SNK's fighters having medium attack buttons, controlling them feels quite natural, and I've never had any issues performing basic maneuvers. If you approach the game from a competitive perspective where the tier list is king, then the likes of Dan, Kyosuke, and Yuri will never reach the potential of Sagat, Cammy, and Blanca. But for those who don't really care about perceived character strength, there's a lot of material to get lost in. In terms of game feel, CVS2 is one of the most satisfying fighting games I've ever played, as each of its combatants brings something special to the table. Whether you want to select a team of 3 top tiers in K-Groove, or mess around with a casual team with a weaker groove, the game's tightly designed mechanics and responsive controls grants all of these decisions with finesse. If there's one concept the game is defined by, it has to be player freedom. Like with its cousin Marvel vs. Capcom 2, CVS2 received home ports for the PS2, Xbox, and the GameCube, believe it or not. The latter two contain the phrase EO as part of its name, representing easy operation, a control scheme designed for inexperienced fighting game players, as well as general balance changes. This update, along with the original arcade release, made their way into Capcom Fighting Collection 2, but in order to experience the game's home console single-player content, we need to jump back to its 6th generation ports. Man, I've never seen this many diamonds in my life. Starting off with arcade mode, it's about what you would expect, as you select a team, blitz through a series of CPU-controlled enemies, and finish with a final boss. Normally, this sequence of events wouldn't be anything to write home about, but the game's point system ties into which ending you receive. By performing combos, avoiding damage, and just generally playing really well, your point total will increase in real time, and one of 6 secret bosses will step into the ring should you meet certain requirements. The harder they are to reach, the harder they are to fight, with the likes of Shinakuma or Ultimate Rugal being deadly in every sense of the word. Defeating these secret bosses unlocks them as playable fighters, granting you the opportunity to have insane damage in real matches. With that said, it's a pretty generic arcade experience outside of the point system, but it also doesn't do anything wrong, so I just can't complain. It's pretty cool, but nothing mind-blowing. Survival mode is up next, tasking you with defeating all 48 characters in one sitting. There's nothing inherently wrong with an objective like this, but it doesn't grab me in the same way that arcade mode does, meaning I quickly became bored. However, if you're the type of player who likes to bunker down and destroy a gauntlet of enemies, this is going to be right up your alley. Versus mode is where you can do battle with another player, and all sorts of gameplay tweaks are available in the options menu. For most people, this is almost exclusively where CVS2 will be played, so this poor diamond has a lot of pressure on its shoulders. You can even watch match replays after you've finished fighting to learn from your mistakes, and with how screen recording software wasn't as accessible as it is nowadays, match replays are a great feature. Training mode follows suit with high playtime, as it's where you can work on your skills by interacting with numerous options. There are no modern training materials like a frame data display for example, but that's to be expected for a game this old. Honestly, just like arcade mode, I don't have many strong thoughts or feelings about the training mode as it's very basic and doesn't give me much to discuss. With how many systems are present within CVS2, I wish there was a formal set of tutorials or something like that, something to assist newer players in their journey to learn about each groove in detail. Color Edit mode is the final diamond on the menu, and I used to love this as a kid. You're given free rein to highlight specific parts of a character's sprite and change their color data. It's fascinating to see how each character is broken down into several layers, even if you're like me and you can't make anything cool looking. Because I have the brain of a child, I thought it would be funny to make Morrigan a solid purple, and as CVS2 is like that cool uncle who slips you chocolate past your bedtime, it let me go wild. Now you might be thinking that this would be all, but there are actually a few secret features hidden in plain sight. After unlocking Shin Akuma and Ultimate Rugal, you can hold down Light and Medium Punch while selecting Arcade Mode to transform it into Boss Battle Mode. This tasks you with defeating every boss character in a single sitting, so it's sort of like a souped up survival mode. In a more obvious fashion, Groove Edit Mode is featured plain and center once you unlock it, and you're given 4,000 points to create your own set of features from scratch. For example, if I want K-Groove's Rage Gauge, P-Groove's Parries, and C-Groove's Rolling all in one groove, I can do just this, assuming I stay under the point limit. Interestingly, beating Survival Mode rewards you with infinite points, allowing you to turn on every system at once. Being able to mix and match game mechanics to create your own custom gameplay loop is one of my favorite features, as you can perform so many wild combos that would otherwise be impossible. Overall, CVS2 has plenty of content to keep players engaged, even if it's a bit old on the predictable side. In typical early 2000s Capcom fighter fashion, there's nothing particularly innovative that wider audiences haven't seen before, but its contents have been designed well enough for me to not really mind that much. Everything here is about what you would expect to see from a home port of an arcade fighting game from 2001, and it gets the job done well enough. When CVS2 power dunked its way into the world of fighting games, it thankfully received a warmer reception than its older brother. Finding data and review quotes about the arcade version specifically is quite the challenge, as much of the title's coverage is focused on the aforementioned home ports. The PS2 and Xbox versions sit at an 81 and 80 respectively on Metacritic, with the GameCube port having a 68. Nintendo's Purple Console runs the game on a technical level just fine, but its controller's unorthodox button layout isn't the most intuitive to play fighting games with. Outside of controllers designed for aliens, the game's character roster, groove system, and amount of creative tools given to players were received exceptionally well, but I can't say the same for the art style. I wish I could. Sega's Naomi arcade board is responsible for rendering brand new 3-dimensional backdrops, whereas the characters come in the form of 2D sprites. As mentioned earlier, the rise of advanced graphics technology allowed developers to utilize full 3D visuals for their works, with this presentation style quickly becoming the industry standard. For an audience that had grown accustomed to the hyper-realistic nature of Jin Kazama's muscles on the PS1, a fighting game that was released 4 years later with quote-unquote inferior graphics simply wasn't up to par with what the competition was putting out. Looking back on it nowadays, it's obvious that the animations and colouring found within sprite-based games haven't aged a day, with CVS2 being no exception. Reading out more review quotes would be cool and all, but what I find more interesting is the ongoing relationship between Capcom and SNK, as well as their crossover's level of success. According to Street Fighter co-creator Takashi Nishiyama, the CVS series wasn't a failure, but it didn't live up to his expectations either. That's not to say these games are bad, far from it, they just didn't perform very well commercially, as well as failing to bridge the gap between the company's respective fan bases. Street Fighter 3 planner Shinichiro Obata states that around the time of CVS2's launch, fighting game sales figures, and just arcades in general, suffered from a massive decline in popularity, with Capcom's Gundam games being their only successful arcade ventures during this period. When combined with Keiji Inafune influencing the company to focus on the home console market, poor CVS never stood a chance at making a return. Despite this, Hideaki Itsuno claimed that a potential CVS3 was planned to come to the PS2, boasting brand new 3D graphics and gameplay. What started out as another 2D fighter transformed into a fully 3D title, one that never saw the light of day due to SNK's financial issues. If they hadn't gone bankrupt and downsized their operations in the early 2000s, I'm sure that CVS3 would have launched without a hitch. Fast forwarding to where we are today, the fighting game market at large has reclaimed its spot in the mainstream, with Capcom and SNK releasing new titles to market. Terry and Mai are in Street Fighter 6, Luke and Juri have crossover costumes in City of the Wolves, and both companies must have worked their way through legal hell to release Capcom Fighting Collection 2, so it's clear that the chances of receiving a proper two-dimensional CVS3 are higher than ever. A grand reunion has been teased for ages now, and as team-based fighting games are all the rage, I could easily see both studios teaming up once again for current platforms. What's bittersweet is that since Itsuno departed from Capcom to form his own studio in 2024, he'll never get to design a new game in the series. But to be honest, with how the Street Fighter 6 team is making waves in the genre, I think they'll be okay. Before we wrap up, I'll add that even today, CVS2 is still being played at a ridiculously high level all around the globe. It was an official side game at EVO 2025, with players like Bass, Silentscope, John Choi, Bucktooth, and plenty more all holding it down. There's no shortage of high-level competition to be found online, and I urge you to check it out if you want to experience a blend of classic 2D fighter footsies with Bison painting an imaginary fence. Overall, I had a great time with CVS2, as it's one of those classic fighters that ages like a fine wine. No matter how much time passes, its confident blend of system mechanics and a colossal character roster still feels fresh and exciting, allowing players of all skill levels to interact with its battle mechanics in unique ways. I spoke about this just before, but with how Capcom and SNK are on amazing terms, it wouldn't surprise me if we see a third entry into the series be released for the current generation of consoles. There have been so many new characters from both companies who were created after CVS2's release, and I would love to see some more obscure picks for the roster. This is all hypothetical, of course, but what remains grounded in reality is Capcom vs SNK 2's fun factor. If you haven't played the game in a while, or you've just never played it before, then I really urge you to give it a shot. It's so much fun. You can play it for free on PC via Fightcade, or on any major system through the Capcom Fighting Collection too, so there are no shortage of ways to experience the game. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you and your time, and I hope you had fun. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.